Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and today on the show, Neema Shah with her wonderful debut novel, Kololo Hill. Now, this is one of those books that puts a fairly it puts a big strain on my productivity because it's inside a historical context, and these books make me want to read more about the real history behind them, and then I get caught up in Wikipedia, and my whole productivity is down. Now, in this book, there is a fairly tight-knit family at the center of these real historic events, and um, well, you don't want to know my issues with my productivity. You want to know about what the book is about. The story takes place in 1972 in Uganda, where a dictator by the name of Idi Amin is in power, and he not only murders through his, I believe, 8-year reign, a, a the number is estimated at 300,000 people, mostly other tribes within the country, but he also expels about 50,000 people of Indian origin who have lived in the country for a very long time. Matter of fact, these Uganda Indians came to the country to build the railway. Um, and we have some slides later on. It was called the Lunatic Railway that connected Uganda with Kenya. 80,000 Asians lived in Uganda at the time, and the story follows this. I don't know. We'll ask Nima. Broadly speaking, middle class family. A mother, her two sons. One is married, and his wife. They get split up because everyone has a different passport when they get expelled. They're being asked to leave the country within 90 days. They start over in England, and that's the second part of the book. And in England, there is the whole gamut: xenophobia, classism. There's a lot of hardship on these folks, but there is also some real human kindness amid this brutal bureaucratic system. There's also some marital issues. There is some secrets. Um, yeah, I should not say more before introducing our guest, Neema Shah. Welcome to the Second Life Book Club.
Hi, I'm so thrilled to be here. This world is absolutely amazing, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting to you.
We are very, very thrilled having you. I have to ask, your book is not sci-fi or any type of other genre fiction, except for maybe, well, there's romance in there and there's uh, a historic backdrop, but you are appearing in an astronaut embodiment. Why?
Oh my gosh, I've always wanted to go to space. I would absolutely love to go into space ever since I was young. So this at the moment is as close as I'll get. I probably wouldn't last very long because obviously I don't have a helmet on right now. But
That's right. That's right. We have pretty good air down here. You don't need a helmet.
but yeah, it's sort of fulfilling a dream, and until hopefully I can go into the real thing.
Oh, we already have some interesting people here on the chat, and let me just also remind folks that I'm looking at the YouTube chat and the local chat. So please feel free to chat and comment on what we're talking about. I might pick it up, I might not. If I don't pick it up, don't be shy. Just cut and paste and be annoying, be obnoxious, and then maybe I'll pick it up. Here's somebody on YouTube saying, I read a similar topic book named We Are All Birds of Uganda.
Yeah.
I researched author Neema Shah. It is an honor to be in the audience today, says Jean Fraser. Uh,
Oh, that's lovely.
awesome. I want to quickly have the camera zoom around a little bit to get a feel for the people who are not in the room, and then we'll get right into it. So the set is, as always, built by Ruby, who couldn't be here today, and this is sort of a mixture of different elements. So behind us, you'll see this sort of boarded up, stately manner. We'll ask Nima if that's, if all the Uganda Asians were actually, you know, fairly well off, or if there were different classes of people in the socioeconomic sphere there. But that's sort of a house, and it sort of symbolizes that people have already left, and the house has either been looted by Idi Amin soldiers or otherwise just ready to be given to his people. If the camera zooms back a little bit on the other side behind us, the audience in the audience's back is supposed to be Lake Victoria. Now, I wanted to actually block off Lake Victoria in the back, um, but this is of course the Second Life Ocean, which goes on forever, and we couldn't block it off. And then I realized, wait a minute, Lake Victoria is so big. Um, when you stand on one shore, you don't see the other shore. So that worked out. And if the camera could zoom to the landing point, there is Motishan's Mini India. That's a kind of a mini mart or Dukan, I think is the word,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And these types of mini marts, that's a big. I love it. It plays a big role in the book as a place to hang out, also for the kids to meet people. And one of the protagonists in the book runs this mini mart in Kampala in Uganda, and then of course as the dictator Idi Amin comes in, things fall apart a little bit. Now the historical context. Before we go to the historical context, Nima, tell us a little bit. How was it publishing your debut novel during during the pandemic?
interesting. That's for sure. It's been a really strange year, and I think, I think as a debut author, you always have these visions um, of what your launch would be like, and being able to go into a bookshop and seeing your book. But actually, in February, when my book launched, all the bookshops in the UK were closed. So I had to
Oh,
sort of make my peace with that and not having an in-person launch party and all of that. But actually, once I made my peace with that, it was quite nice to embrace the other elements. So, obviously social media became much more important, virtual events became more important, and actually you reach a lot more people, as I'm sure you know,
yeah.
with online events than we would otherwise in person, and
But it
it's
is really
obviously more
that feeling. I mean,
accessible.
you live with this book for so long, and then just to see it. I mean, I can completely relate if you feel like, oh, you go into the store and it's all decked out in my book. It's
Yeah, yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
That kind of
It's
feeling.
that kind of thing. But you know what? Also, I didn't really know what a launch was like because I've never had one, so I didn't have a point of reference as such. So in
Mhm.
that sense, I suppose it made it a bit easier. And I've embraced it. I think it's not necessarily how I ideally would have done it, but I'm fine with it, and it's been an amazing year so far, so I can't complain.
See, and you actually have decked out. I should have mentioned this early, but we do it every week. So the books are here on the table, just like a real
Yeah.
bookstore, and people can click on it, and they can go to your website,
Oh,
and
great.
the book is just. I mean, apart from the subject matter, and again, really well written. It's really an amazing design. I mean, not every book is designed like this. This well designed,
Yeah,
the
I'm lucky.
sleeve, and it's wonderful.
Thank
Um,
you. I didn't have anything to do with that, but I am really lucky. Either way, the designer is amazing.
right, authors they don't even. I've learned that even uh, best-selling authors don't have a lot of say, or sometimes absolutely no say
Yeah.
in how the cover is designed.
Yeah, I mean, Picador were great. I did collaborate with them, but obviously it's not my design, and ultimately I would never have been able to come up with anything like this. And it's just, I think it's really helped. And I think yellow, obviously is also a very positive color, and I think people have responded well to that this year in particular. It's a color of optimism, despite some of the subject matter, obviously. And I think the story, without it's not giving away spoilers, there's still some hope in the story, despite the things that happen.
I think so. I mean, there's love, there's some betrayal, but there is love, and there is agency, and people going through um, hardships, and then they come out the other end
Yeah.
better. What fascinated me was, well, a whole number of things. So first of all, why were there so many Asians from India in Uganda at the time?
Yeah, so there were two waves of immigration actually, well, immigration rather, into Uganda. So the first wave was in the sort of 19th century, and in the early building of the railway, as you mentioned, so the East African Railway. And the British, even from those days, felt that, obviously not very correctly, but felt that the Indians were more reliable and could oversee the Africans to build the railway.
And
And
I actually, sorry to interrupt, and the camera can see this here in the back. I took some pictures here from the internet, some photos of the time. And again, this was called the Lunatic Railway, and there were 2,500 workers died during the construction of this East African Railway.
yeah, it was really difficult times, obviously, and they were, and a lot of them came from hardships, and that's one of the main reasons that people came over to East Africa. Obviously, there were famines going on in India and other things, so it was for economic reasons. And actually, most of that migrant wave went back to India when it was finished. But then there was a sort of a second wave in the early to mid 20th century, which is what is the case with this family that I obviously feature. And it also reflects my own family background. So my grandparents went over during World War II to, it was actually Kenya and Tanzania, but we have an extended family who went to Uganda. So again, for economic reasons, my family come from, like many of the immigrants that came to East Africa, came from rural communities and not very wealthy at
Right.
all.
It's
So
very
yeah,
similar to the guest worker program in Germany in the 60s. They built a subway, folks from Turkey and Greece, and it was the same thing that the government thought
yeah,
like, okay, you can come build this thing and then, you can
yeah,
leave. And there was very little done in terms of really integrating the guest workers into society, and it was frankly a complete failure, and it's
right,
still
yeah.
not really acknowledged.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Although I would say, like with the second migration, they weren't necessarily coming to help the British. It was more a case of they knew their opportunities. They could.
Hmm.
It was a hard life, but they could build something that they wouldn't have been able to build in India, coming from very poor background and still suffering from famines and all the rest of it. So it gave them an opportunity to build a different kind of life.
Right, because I actually what was going to ask you if everybody was really rich. I mean, I found in my research, I found this Shyla put a collage together, Indian residences in Jinja, and they look pretty nice. And in the
Mm.
book, you hint a little bit at it that the richer folks live on top of Kololo Hill, and then there are some poorer folks that they live further down. But at the time your book takes place, the story takes place, would you say that most Asians in Uganda were fairly well off compared to regular Ugandans, or is that hard to say?
I would say, yeah, the majority were better off than regular
Because there was
most
resentment
Ugandans.
against them too, because I mean that's
Yeah,
what Idi
yeah.
Amin was exploiting. He would say, these people they're making bank and then they're leaving anyways and just sort of like smuggling all the money and they're leaving with the money and we have nothing.
Yeah, I mean, although they were generally better off than the ethnic Ugandans, um, most of them were still sort of surviving day to day. They weren't able to save much money. They certainly weren't able to get it out of the country, which was something that President Idi Amin said that all Asians were doing. But there
Hmm.
were some very, very wealthy Asians who ran factories and all the rest of it. And it was them that were sending things to the West, to Switzerland, to other banks. And they kind of got, the whole community got tainted by that behavior.
Mm.
And also there was other resentment, rightfully so, and that whole divide and rule sort of attempt by the British, even back in the 19th century, sort of still pervaded through the centuries. And the Asians, probably a lot of them probably did feel that they were somehow better than the ethnic Ugandans. There
Right.
wasn't much attempt to sort of integrate.
We have to remind folks that Britain was a major power before Brexit. Major imperial power. They were really
Remember that?
yes, you remember, guys? They were seen as big players in the international scene with the Raj in India, and they were, I think, at the time, Uganda was a protectorate. I forgot the exact arrangement. we're speaking about also Idi Amin. So let me bring up this slide, and um, I listened to a German radio documentary actually about Idi Amin, and he was, it's not shocking. I mean, he killed, like I said, about 300,000 people in the course of his reign of 8 years, but he was not really criticized on the international stage. This is a slide that our researcher Shaila put together. This is a quote from him. There is freedom of speech, but I cannot guarantee freedom after speech.
Mm,
And
extraordinary.
he killed people. He threw them to the crocodiles, and I mean, absolutely, absolutely brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly that. And actually, it was quite interesting that you're absolutely right that I mean, he went to Buckingham Palace. He had tea with the Queen early
Yeah.
on in his presidency. I think then slowly, obviously, the UK realised that he was not someone really that they should be mingling with, especially obviously after the expulsion and after they saw what the sorts of atrocities that were going on. But early on, yeah, he definitely was courting the world stage, and the British were amongst them.
And the Germans had him over. There was
Right.
also development money was exchanged. So this is again, Anima, thank you for writing this, because I don't know, would you call this historic? Does this qualify or classify as historical fiction? I don't even know where this term
Yes, I
starts and
mean,
ends.
apparently it is historical fiction. I have said that to some people, and they've looked a bit shocked because clearly 1972 wasn't that long ago. But I think in publishing terms, it's classified as historical fiction.
Hmm. Historical fiction, I think, may be fast becoming one of my favorite genres, because
Oh,
again,
great.
yeah, it really whets the appetite. My book stack is so high. The history of Haiti, the Haiti Revolution is on top, and now Uganda is topping it. Here's a quick slide to get a little feel of just the global sort of geographic dimensions, the distance here from India and coming over there to Uganda. Over there, you see this with Lake Victoria right there in the middle. Uh, part of the lake is also in Tanzania, half of it, and a little bit in Kenya there. Um, and here's another little map of a little bit closer of the surrounding countries. Jamanki in the local chat says freedom of speech, but not freedom after
Yeah.
speech. Sounds like today, but without the crocodiles. Yeah. So yes, you're right, Jamanki. The matter of getting rid of people, although in the case of let's not get too sidetracked, but the journalist Khashoggi, who was dismembered by um, King Salman, and the name escapes me, Saudi Arabia,
Mm,
incidentally, where Idi Amin found refuge and died in
yeah.
2003. Can you believe this?
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, and actually, on that point, yeah, some of these things maybe they're not going on in quite the same way, but they're going on, and unfortunately, we don't seem to, or some of us don't seem to learn from history.
The tensions also seem to be going on to this day, also between Asians and Ugandans. But
Yes.
let's get a little feel of the style. Um, if I could ask you to carefully stand up here in
Oh
Second
yes.
Life, it's
Hold
an
on.
acquired skill. Uh, we know it's difficult we acknowledge that, but we are a inclusive um,
Um,
bunch of
I-
book nerds.
I'm
And
clicking. I'm clicking. Oh wait, I'm standing up. It just took
yeah,
a
you're
second.
standing. There you go.
It's just been a long day. That's all. Uh,
It's been a long
um,
day. Your avatar reflects your own um, long day, I think.
um, oh wait, I've turned too much there. Bear with me because I'm still getting used to this. Oh no, I can. Can I click on the actual stand to get there? I
No,
have to
but
actually move forward,
that's a
don't I?
great idea. We have to do this for next
Please
time.
help me. For lazy
No,
people, that would be really
you know
helpful.
what? I'm gonna move the stand to you. Just move a little bit to the side.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
there we
you're
go.
coming. There you're
Yeah.
coming.
I was trying to get angled. Oh, I've gone too far. I'll say
No, no,
hi
no.
to everyone over here. Yeah, hi everyone.
Hold on.
Oh
Stand
no.
right there. Stand right there. I'll move the book stand to where you
Okay,
are.
I'll just turn.
There you exactly see. This is brilliant.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Here, it's right in front of you.
We could have been here a while otherwise.
Jessica says, doing great,
Well,
Nima.
it's debatable,
Jessica.
but thank you.
Before you read, actually, I brought up this slide. This is a quote that Shyla pulled from one of your interviews because your book is very much about home. And I
Yeah.
could relate to this book because my parents from my mother's side, they fled Poland in 1945 when the Russians came in from the east and they basically expelled the German enclave, and people went to southern Germany and to Austria and resettled there.
Mm.
Um, so the that story from that part of the family, when I talk to them, they it's very similar to what your characters sort of experience in the book in terms of where should I go, where's my home, should I go back, all this kind of stuff. And this is a quote from you here. I'm going to read it. Through my 20s and 30s, I started to really feel the UK is where I belong and I feel completely at home. And then things like Brexit sort of bring that back into sharp relief. But I suppose I feel a bit differently about it now as I'm older and I really don't care what people that don't think I belong here think. It is up to me where I feel I belong and taking ownership of that. And that's what I also wanted to try to portray for some of my characters. You can absorb different places into your heart, and home is where you decided to be, not where someone else decides it to be. And you're obviously alluding also to the fact that in your book and in real life today, uh, you have people who may look at people with a different skin color weird, but other people straight out say, "Why don't you go back where you came from?"
Yeah.
Does this happen? Did this ever happen to you
Yeah.
personally?
Actually, when I was 7 and 8 in the playground, it happened
Wow.
regularly. Yeah. And I mean, I was brought up in North London. It was a very multicultural place, and it wasn't always actually just from white people. I had that from other people as well. So, yeah, unfortunately, and then I've heard it in my teens again and stuff. It does happen, and that's what I meant about my 20s and 30s, because actually I didn't experience much of that racism once I got into my 20s and my 30s in London at all. And as I said, it's obviously then certain things like the rise of Trump and the Windrush scandal and
Yeah.
Brexit have sort of brought it all back into sharp relief, and it did make me question who I was and where I belonged. But as I said, I've kind of got over it. I don't really care what people think.
That's important. They don't have the right to take that from you because if they do, then they win and they have to be
Yeah,
fought every single day.
yeah,
Let's read a little bit. You're reading right from the beginning. This is where there's different points of view. This is Asha,
hmm,
the young woman that is married to Pran, and she's traveling with her in-laws. Idi Amin is already in power. Restrictions of movement are in place. Rumors of violence. I don't know if anybody has actually seen the violence, but this is right from the very, very beginning of the book. Take it
yeah.
away.
Thank you. They'd be back before curfew. Asha was sure of it. She got out of the car and looked far across the water to where the Nile flowed into Lake Victoria. In the late afternoon light, the mosquitoes glowed gold like embers from a fire. Be quick, won't you? Jaya called from the car window, pulling her sari chundri tighter over her silver hair. And be careful. I'm sorry, my computer seems to have logged itself out. I just want to check you can still hear me.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, that's fine as long as you can hear me. Apologies. Hush, Jaya. She's not a child, said Mutterchen. Besides, we can see her from here. The car swayed like a rowing boat as Asha's father-in-law hoisted himself into the back seat and lay down for a nap. Asha slipped off her two jumper, blades of grass tickling her toes, the dragonflies dancing at her feet. She shook her hair free from her ponytail, aware that Jaya was probably looking on, loose hair for loose women. Jaya had wanted to go straight home, anxious to reach Kampala before the soldiers began their night patrols, but Asha had managed to persuade them to stop off on the way. What harm would it do to get a little fresh air after being cooped up in the car, to steal a few moments in the place she'd visited so many times as a child with her parents? There were more people here in the old days, of course, the sweet, smoky scent of roasting mogul carrying across the breeze, tinny transistor radios buzzing in the distance. Now all Asha could see was a few fishing boats, and the crotchety marabou stalks with their black feather cloaks gathered in the shallows. She walked towards the vast water, stretching so far that it looked like an ocean. She'd met Pran for the first time by Lake Victoria, down by Entebbe. She bristled as she thought of him now. She was sure that Pran was keeping something from her. He dodged her questions before she'd left for Ginger that morning. Asher wandered further along. It was too beautiful a day to waste it thinking about him. Something was jutting out at the water's edge, a strange mass that seemed to grow from the banks, blackened in parts, ashen in others. Asher stepped closer. This wasn't the root of a plant, but sinewy muscle, twisting tendon. Upstream there were more, hacked bodies bobbing in the billowing lake. A crackle of fear. Asher turned fast, hurrying back towards the others. Slow your pace, she told herself. Don't alarm them. What happened? Why were you hurrying? Jaya got out of the car. Motachin sat up, voice full of sleep. What's going on? It's been a long day. Asher glanced back, trying to sound calm. Shall we go? I thought you wanted to spend some time here. I did. I'm just a little tired. Asher hovered by the back seat. Why wouldn't Motachin hurry up and put his shoes on? She looked towards the road. No sign of soldiers, thank God. She told herself that the rumours must have been embellished, growing as neighbour told friend, told colleague. How could she have been so wrong? The broken limbs flashed through her mind as she climbed into the car. Idi Amin didn't care that those poor people's bodies were bobbing in the water, out on show for all to see, killing anyone who spoke out against him or threatened his power. He might not stop until the whole river ran red. Thank you.
And that's Neema Shah reading from Kololo Hill, uh, right there from the beginning. And Asha, she hints at some trust issues with her husband Pran. They just recently got married. This is actually something interesting that you hint a little bit on it. Again, this scene is Motishan. Is am I pronouncing this correctly?
I mean, yeah, Motachand is how I would say it.
Motichan.
Yeah, that's
Motichan.
great. That was great.
So Motichan is and Chaya. They're the in-laws, and Motichan owns that mini mart, that dukan. One thing that fascinates me that Asha is a very independent woman, a strong, independently minded woman. She's married to Pran, and they have seen each other before. That it's not an arranged marriage, and you
Yeah.
just hint it's a very small part of the story, but I found it fascinating because by the sheer fact that a neighbor saw them. It,
Yes.
it, it basically becomes an arranged marriage or at least an accelerated marriage. So in a sense, they can't date as long as they want to because the parents go like, "Oh my God, you've been seen with the this boy, so we got to sort of taper over this, and now we got to sort of accelerate the marriage." And that I think becomes a strong plot point why, despite her love for him, she feels really kind of rushed into it, almost like an arranged marriage, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still by that point in time, that's still very liberal, even for them to have seen each other before, a few times and so on. I mean, arranged marriages at that time, for example, my parents met a handful of times and then they were married, but they did both have a choice. They were able to both say yes, we want to get married. Obviously, it's very different to how most people get married nowadays. But yeah, but it wasn't unheard of. There were what we would call love marriages, and that's just the way they're described. But obviously,
Hmm.
we'd hope that all marriages, even if they're arranged, are ultimately end up in love. But yeah, I definitely think for Asha that was the case. It was she was sort of pushed along into the decision, and it does obviously become more of a challenge as the story progresses.
If I could, let's see if you can sit down because then I'll move for the next reading. I'll move the book stand in front of you, then you can remain seated. These are the little sort of comic relief to keep it light here on the book club. We had people fall off the stage and all sorts of things. As you're going back there, see, awesome. Um, I put up another quote that Shyla, our researcher, pulled. Um, Here you're saying there's a perception of Asian women being timid and weak and mild. That's not been my experience growing up. My grandmother is 4 foot nothing really, and she looks like she would blow over in the wind. But she has seen and done things in her life that I could only ever dream of. And actually, writing this book, I realized how much you have to be a trailblazer to either voluntarily or involuntarily leave the home you know. I hope that I have been able to cast light on the stories that aren't well known more widely in literature and change perceptions of people, particularly Asian female protagonists. What is really cool about the mother in your book, I thought, is that you describe her when she comes to Uganda and she learns Swahili. Because she speaks Swahili, um, she she perceives herself as being more assertive. So, like with this different language, she becomes a different person. I
Yes.
found that that was really cool. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it definitely. I mean, it reflects that that is sort of taken partly from my own experience, but not. I don't speak Swahili. Well, I speak a few words, but I speak some Spanish. And when I went traveling in South America and spoke only Spanish with people, I found that I became a more confident and a more warm person. I don't know what it was, but it's something about language that does that.
yeah.
Similarly, yeah, when I
Well, it's
speak
like a little,
Gujarati at home.
it's in a way, even if you don't speak it perfectly, it becomes a little bit of a comfort, maybe a shield, little bit that makes you bolder. I mean, I feel like
Mm.
that with English sometimes. When I came to America and I started in radio, although I had a terrible accent, I felt like I could sort of hide behind it somehow, and it could just try out things that I wouldn't try in German.
Yes. Yeah, you become someone else, which is what happens to Jaya. She is a different person from having learned to speak Swahili and learning to communicate in a different way.
But then, of course, as they move on, they're forced to go to other parts of the world. They get separated because they have different passports. So the bulk of the family goes to the UK, and Pran stays behind. They tell him to go to India. It turns out that he is going elsewhere. But as they go, and this is from the later part of the book, here's a little um, excerpt from that because Jaya, who is so confident in Uganda when she comes to, I don't know how old she is, maybe in her 50s, 60s, comes to England, the she is not able to pick up English that quickly. And I'm going to read this uh, excerpt here from your book. Forcing English words into her head was difficult as though there were too many other words crammed in there already. VJ, her son, had taught her some phrases, but she'd learned them without fully understanding the meaning of each word, and so remained without the ability to express her own thoughts and feelings in this strange new language. She knew she sounded like a child, broken sentences, fractured vowels. Now, this is something I think is really important for us to remind ourselves when we talk about immigrants and refugees, how destructive that is for your own self-confidence if you don't speak the language and if you're the country that you're coming into is equating intelligence with language, right? And
Yeah.
that would be my major criticism in Germany. The Germans are completely obsessed with sort of mastery of language, and they just, yeah, if you make a few grammatical mistakes, basically means for them that you're otherwise also completely incapable of doing anything.
I think that is. I mean, I don't know. That's obviously the case in Germany, but I think more generally, as you say, we do equate the ability to speak fluidly in a particular language, as you say, with intellect, which is really sad. And don't get me wrong, the Jaya has the appetite, but as you say, she's in her 50s by the time she gets to the UK, and yeah, these things don't come. She's got all these other life experiences that are in her head already, and she's got to now try and sort of flex her mind to think in a different way, and it's a challenge.
Mm.
So yeah, that's what I was trying to reflect there, I guess.
Here's a collage of pictures that I found of Ugandan Indians arriving in the UK, and I think there's a picture also here in New Zealand. So they go all over the place, um, wherever their passport allows them to go. In your book, the family arrives in the UK, and they get scrutinized there as well. Talk a little bit about the challenge, because this is really the hypocrisy of an imperial power. I mean, there's a lot of problems with imperial powers. I think the main one is that they exist, but that their subjects are not even, free to basically travel if there's an issue.
Yeah, so in the case, I don't want to give away who exactly out of the characters gets to the UK, but some of the characters have British passports because obviously Uganda was a British colony. By the time 1972 comes around, it had been independent for a while, but there was still that connection uh, to Britain. And in fact, when independence was granted, that was when the UK had said, you can get your British passports if you want, but do
Mhm.
it sort of now. And that's what happened. That's so people were coming over as British citizens, essentially, on British passports. But there was this. I
But they
don't.
were
It's the
still scrutinized because in the beginning
yeah,
of the book, VJ
absolutely.
goes there, and this threw me off a little bit. I want to ask you, VJ has a British passport, and he goes
Yes,
in for a couple of days to London or 5 days, and he gets grilled at immigration of why are you here, how long are you staying, who are you with, why are you alone? I
yeah.
mean, I get asked that when I moved to the U.S., but I'm not a citizen.
Yeah, I mean, there were caveats. We're giving you these passports, but actually, now that a few years have passed, they were feeling that there were too many Asian immigrants. That generally, the immigrants there were too many immigrants coming into the UK,
Mhm.
and immigration laws were being tightened up. So yes, the passports were granted earlier on, but that things had changed and the environment had changed. And so yeah, Vijay does get scrutinized. That he and they weren't just letting people in just with passports. You still had to try and prove that you had the financial means to come here and live here if you wanted to live here, especially. So yeah, there absolutely was. And in fact, even when the expulsion happened, there was a feeling that the people with British passports should be able to be granted refugee status fairly easily, but the
Right.
British were umming and ahhing about it. Equally, so were India, but these people didn't have Indian passports, so maybe that there was a bit more reason for them to say no. But that's what was going on. No one really wanted the refugees.
So they couldn't easily go back to India either, right?
Well, not even back, right? Because some of these people had
They
never
were
been
not
to
born. Yeah,
India.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, they were, and this was the other part of it, right? So that some of them were Indian origin, but had never been to India in their lives, didn't
Exactly.
have passport, yeah, etc., etc.
No, this is at the core again, the theme of home, because this is a discussion within the family in your story. Where should we go? Well, India, this is where we're from. No, we're actually not from there. We actually born in Uganda. So,
Yeah.
but they had such a strong, like many immigrant communities, a strong, bond with their culture and continuing their culture, which I find so amazing. To your knowledge and your research, did you find the Indians in Uganda mingling with Ugandan culture, or keeping this fairly separate? I mean, again, this is, for right wingers, this is one of the biggest arguments, where they say, well, we can't have them because they're building these subcultures and these sort of enclaves and whatnot, or these cultural ghettos they don't want to integrate. Um, I personally think it's a beautiful thing if you continue your cultural traditions in whatever country you are. The US, at least in theory, the model in the US would allow that. In reality, sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm.
But what did you find out, like with that kind of thing, like the cultural
Yeah.
dialogue in Uganda at the time?
Yeah. I mean, I could base some of that on, as I said, my own family background because Kenya and Tanzania have very similar cultural sort of makeups, as Uganda, but in terms of research as well. Yeah, there was an insularity to the Ugandan Asian population. They did tend to um, stick to themselves, and that was obviously partly what brought about some of the resentment. That's not to say that there wasn't any integration. There were certain um, young people who were born to say a Ugandan, ethnic Ugandan dad and an Asian. Well, it was more likely to be the other way around, actually. An Asian
Well, that
man.
kind of mingling, I didn't even think about that, but
Yeah, it was rare. It was very rare
ah,
by that time, but it happened. And there's a couple of references to that in the book as well. But generally, no. And in fact, there's a story. it's possibly hearsay, who knows? But they say that one of the reasons that President Idi Amin actually expelled the Asians was because he asked, like he was friend with an Asian man. He was friends with an Asian man,
Mhm.
and he said he wanted to marry the Asian man's daughter, and the Asian man was horrified and packed up and left the very next day. And apparently, Idi Amin got very angry. That's what the story is. Obviously, it probably is just a
Wow.
story, but yeah, it's things like that.
Well, by all accounts, he was. I mean, if you're a dictator, I guess there is something peculiar, sociopathic about you. But he was also really a loose cannon. That, from what I heard on this radio reportage, that he would be incredibly impulsive. I mean, you hint at it
Yeah,
through the story too, because people don't take him seriously. Your
yeah,
protagonists, they say, "What he said? All Asians got to go in 90 days." Come on, he's crazy. He'll change his mind in the morning, but then, boom, there it is.
yes.
Um,
And he did sometimes. He changed his mind about laws overnight sometimes, other laws, and that was why, yeah, they didn't take it seriously. You wouldn't be able to take something like that seriously out of nowhere, I think.
yeah, it's again, I mean, the historical setting is absolutely fascinating, and the story on top, just really gripping. I would say let's read another excerpt, and
Yep.
you can remain seated if you like.
Okay.
Uh, then I will move the. See, they can't do that on Zoom. They can't move a book stand on Zoom. They don't even have book stands on their Zoom meetings or astronaut things. Not that this is a competition, but every once in a while, I do need to. I need to take a little stab at the Zoom people. Let's see here. Let's move the book stand. And this
Thank you.
excerpt is about this is Jaya, Asha's mother, and they go visit a older woman who is, I guess, fairly wealthy. Lives there in Kampala on Kololo Hill up there. And this excerpt also will tell us a little bit of sort of the makeup of the different classes, and what older people who have been in Uganda and been fairly successful, what they sort of think about the situation. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Anything else we need to set up this scene?
Um, no, not really. I mean, we know Asha and Jaya as the matriarch and the younger woman, and then Mrs. Goswami is their family friend.
Mrs. Goswami, yes.
um, okay, so for decades, the Europeans had lived at the top of Kololo Hill, looking down on the city from their villas and mansions. The scent of jasmine and frangipani wafting in between the houses, hidden by mango trees and rose bushes, papaya and hibiscus. After independence, most of them went back to the colder climes of Britain, Ireland, Germany, and France. The wealthiest Asians had swiftly moved in to take their place. Jaya's friend, Mrs. Goswami, lived in one such home, a house with a pink tiled roof and white walls flanked by proud pillars. Asha decided to join Jaya on one of her afternoon visits, anything to fill the long day that stretched before them. During the drive further up Kololo Hill to Mrs. Goswami's house, Asha watched the narrower streets and compact single-story homes give way to broader roads and vast gated two-floor houses that looked out across the city centre below. Your place on the hill was directly connected to your wealth, with the richest at the very top. Below them all, the poorest Asians lived in cramped old apartment blocks and crumbling houses, and at the foot of the hill were the cement blocks and corrugated iron roofs where many of the black Ugandans lived. Once inside, they were led to a vast reception room filled with statues carved out of soapstone and wood. Asha would much rather have been outside amongst the bright pink flowers of the bougainvillea and the fluttering monochrome butterflies, but instead here she was getting a headache from the gaudy knickknacks in every corner. Come in, Bessie Chao! With each sentence, Mrs. Goswami's voice got louder, the vowels more elongated, as though she was in pain. Abu Jao, she said, gesturing to sit next to her, but Asha swiftly took a place next to a baby elephant. Carved, although a real one wouldn't have surprised her. She nearly slipped off the seat as her bottom hit the plastic protector that Mrs. Goswami had wrapped around all the furniture. Jaya sat opposite, feet dangling from a huge velvet armchair. Grace, called out their host. Where is that girl? Mrs. Goswami eased herself onto the seat with her walking stick. Her hair was slick with coconut oil and pulled back so tight into a huge low bun that her hairline had started to recede. That morning, Mottichand had joked that he could see his reflection on Mrs. Goswami's hair, his face shining back at him in the curve of that black mirror. Finally, she said, watching the house girl, who hummed as she went. A slender girl with almond eyes, she set a tray of food on the table. Biscuits for the guests, and a small banana for you, madam. I know you need to watch your weight, Grace said. Yes, yes, mumbled Mrs. Goswami, a look of embarrassment on her face. And the chai, Grace. She gave Grace a thwack on the ankle with her walking stick, interrupting the house girl's flow for a moment before she hummed louder. Asha caught Grace rolling her eyes. She gave the house girl a conspiratorial smile. Mrs. Goswami turned back to her guests. Gemcho, everyone well? They exchanged pleasantries while Grace left and returned, humming the entire time. Their host must have caught Asha looking at her house girl as she finished serving the tea. I know. That humming is so annoying. Mrs. Goswami waved her hand dismissively. I tried to hit it out of her a couple of times, didn't I, Jaya Ben? Give her a tapat or two. Jaya's gaze remained fixed on her cooling chai. Mrs. Goswami continued, but she doesn't clean as well when I tell her to be quiet. If I want floors that glitter like Lake Victoria, I have to tell her to let her make that racket, nay? Even if she does sound like a drowning hornet. Mrs. Goswami thrust a stainless steel tray under Jaya's nose, the ginger biscuits slipping and sliding across it. Don't be shy now. Eat, eat. The biscuits were overbaked and had caught at the edges, but Jaya took one anyway. So aggressive was Mrs. Goswami's insistence that she try one. When Asha refused a third time, Jaya gave her a look. And how is married life better? Mrs. Goswami peered at Asha through thick glasses. Good, Asha said, for what else could she say? Different, I suppose. I worked in an office for a while, back in Ginger, so I'm trying to get back to the new routine here. Leave the work to the men. Otherwise, what's the point? Why do you girls want to be like them? But it's nice to do it, to be able to do things on your own. Asha shifted in her seat. Earn money. Bapre, did someone put key in your ears or what? That's why you put up with a husband, to provide for you, ne? Asha stared back. What did Mrs. Goswami know? She was a widow with 4 sons who kept her in the lavish lifestyle she was used to. She didn't know what it was like to have a husband who couldn't be trusted.
A husband who
And that's
couldn't
the
be
end.
trusted. Yeah, Pran. That's a little mystery here that goes through threaded through the story. Asha and her um, fairly new husband then thrust upon them the the chaos of the real world and all the other stuff that is happening between them. This
Yeah.
is really wonderful. This is Neema Shah reading from Kololo Hill here on the Second Life Book Club. This mentions the interesting phenomenon of house boys and house girls. So that was pretty common, right, at the
Uh,
time?
yeah, that's right. It still is actually.
Hmm.
So many people. So, for example, I have family that still live in Kenya and Tanzania, and they have their own yeah, houseboys and house girls. Now they're called that. Sorry, I've disappeared into the background. I'm trying to get back to you guys.
You look great. Hit the escape key, escape
Oh
and
yeah,
M. Then
there
you
we
look
are.
through
Oh
your
yeah,
eyes.
that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what stopped happening. Sorry. Um, yeah, basically, most people have servants, even if they're not particularly wealthy. And that was the case with the book. Obviously, this family has one houseboy. I mean, Mrs. Goswami has a house girl, but Jaya and Asha have a houseboy who works in the house for them, and that was quite common. So it's really interesting how closely intertwined their lives were in some ways. You know,
Mm.
ethnic Ugandans coming into the home, coming into businesses, and working closely with Asians, and yet in on a personal level, not really at all. So they were sort of self-segregating in some ways.
But they well with December is the name of the houseboy of Jaya and Asha's and
Yes.
Motishon's family. They seem to have a much closer relationship. And actually, at one point, and this is not a spoiler because it's not happening. In the beginning, I really thought that Jaya might have an illegitimate child with December, but that's sort of
That's another
where
story.
I don't know. My mind went there like, okay, if I would plot this, maybe I would do that, but thank God you didn't do that because it would have been Yeah, it would have been a little a cheap shot, I guess. Uh, so I brought up a quote here. Sorry, an excerpt from the book with December with the houseboy, and this is really interesting because they all have a great relationship with December, and when they get expelled, again, a lot of Ugandans of different tribes that Idi Amin didn't like, they were also killed. So December was really I mean, his life was threatened as much as any other life. But he's a very, very kind person, and he really cares about the family, and they care about him. But then something happens. Of course, I'm not going to spoil it, but this is a quick excerpt here from the beginning, an interaction with December and Asha, the woman, the young woman. Is everything all right? Said December. Asha felt shy all of a sudden, trying so hard to hide how she was feeling, but he'd seen right through it. She knew the family was far closer to December than most were with their houseboys, but it felt strange to talk openly with him, and most of all, she worried that December's kindness might start tears that she couldn't stop. So those relationships were, yeah, they were really tight. I found that fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, but rare. Like I don't actually. There's no. Not that I'm aware. There weren't any actual sort of
yeah.
relationships like that. I mean, there were
Well, you
people
see it
that
in your
helped each
excerpt with
other.
Mrs. Goswami, how she treats
Yes,
her house
that's
girl.
more
I mean,
common.
that's
Yeah,
more common.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
In the local chat here, let us welcome Kovri Matavan. Wow, we
Yes.
got a special
Hi.
guest here. Look at that.
Hello. She's so
Kovri
lovely.
Matavan, wonderful. And she says she just loved this reading. I can picture it
Oh.
all. Eat, eat, eat. Speaking about eating, Shyla says food plays a big role. When did you realize the association between food and home? There's actually a
That's
quote. I'm going to bring up this slide here.
oh.
Go ahead, Nima, because this is something that Shiloh found out about you with the food and this and all that.
Yeah. So I'm not even sure there was a realization of the connection between food and home. I think it's just in my heart. It's part of me. I also just love reading about food in books. Um, shall I read that quote? Actually, shall I read it out? What you've written, what you've
Yeah, if you
pulled together.
like.
So yeah, food is a way that immigrants will sort of carry their heritage with them, even when maybe you lose your language or other things, or you can't be with family. Food is such an important part, and that's why it's an important part of the book. There's definitely that. It's a way of carrying home with you wherever you go in
I
an
think that's
easy
only
way.
because of Indian food is so good. I don't know if it's the same with like Irish food because fish and chips and vinegar, I mean, what's the big deal?
Oh my god, no fish and chips. I'd definitely be carrying that as well. Um, but I think that it for me it wasn't just about that. I also just love reading descriptions of food in books, and it
Yeah.
really frustrates me when a book just says, "And then they ate dinner," and then it moves on. I'm kind of like, what did they? I think it just tells you so much about people. I guess I'm an
Yep.
anthropologist at heart. I'm always fascinated by the choices people make with everyday things like that, and I find it
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely. And then also how they eat.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
yeah,
those
exactly.
details, this is really we I want to move actually to also a few like writing things because let me look at my run sheet here. Well, we have a little bit of time. We're going to roll the post game into the main show as we've done in the last few weeks because then we'll keep it all together, which is nice because people also can watch it later on. um where was I? Yes. Houseboy Ginger and Motishan. Motishan. Do I still pronounce it correctly, or is
Motichan,
it
yeah, that's fine.
Motichan? Motichan, for God's sakes.
Right.
Here's another excerpt because Motichan, and we talked about it a little bit, but he talks about here in this excerpt. Motichan says they can keep on clashing amongst their tribes if they want to, but why don't they keep us out of it? Motichan shook his head. That's when it dawned on Asha. They'd all told themselves that it was nothing to do with them, even when it became obvious that things were getting harder. They all lived up there on Kololo Hill as though they were immune. Now he's talking about the increasing violence of the Idi Amin regime, and you hinted at it earlier that maybe there were a few people who were illegally uh, parking money in offshore accounts, so to speak, but certainly not all Asians or other people of other um, ethnicities and origin, but that kind of feeling that this has nothing to do with me. I find that fascinating. That some people like Moti-chan can be so I don't know, ignorant is not the right word, but sort of apolitical,
Yeah, so detached, and I think
detached. Yeah,
that is the epitome of what some of these people, um, yeah, how people lived.
but that's happening today too. I mean, some
Oh
people
yeah.
go like, "Yeah, I don't know, Brexit, Trump, who cares? I want to drink my morning coffee, look at the sun, and go on a skiing vacation."
Yes, you're right. Exactly, exactly. And not realizing that they are a part of that community, really, and part of that society, as if they are a part of a different society.
Yeah,
And I should say, obviously, this half of the book is set in Uganda and half is set in the UK. And for some of them, these sorts of things are the catalyst for maybe doing something differently. They're getting a second chance and starting a new life, obviously, and an ability to do things differently this time around in the UK, potentially. Not everyone does, but some of
right.
them do try something different.
Well, it's also a matter of the matter of privilege if you're sort of detached and apolitical, and as you said, the second part when they go to England, they are much more confronted with because their privilege is stripped away. They live in these
Hmm.
barracks with the refugees, and all of a sudden there's no houseboy, but there is communal showers basically
Yeah, yeah.
from one day to the next, and that forces them to kind of really look at things in a different way, re-examine maybe the privilege that they used to have in Uganda, which also prompts Pran. He wants to go back. A lot of people want to go back. Some people actually did go back. Let's do one more reading here. But Shyla is, I'm looking at the chat here. Shyla is saying, it stood out to me that VJ is differently abled. What inspired you to make him so? So please describe VJ, because that's just absolutely wonderful how he fits into this whole puzzle. So he has a disability or is differently abled. His arm is missing from birth. It's a birth um, issue. I don't want to say defect. I don't know what the right term would be. But how would you describe VJ, and why is that important for the story?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say I've never heard that term differently able, but I really love it. Um, so yeah, it was he did just sort of come to me like that. I don't personally uh, have a disability, but I have family members who and had family members such as my grandmother who had a disability, and for me, you know, it sometimes it feels like in literary worlds that there are no people with disabilities, that they don't seem to be present in those environments. So why wouldn't there be someone who was a main character as a as a main protagonist with a disability? um all three of my main characters, Jaya, Asha, and Vijay, are in one way or another outsiders. I mean, they're outsiders anyway because they're refugees, of course, but at an individual level, obviously, you've got two women, one who's older, and then you've got Vijay with a disability, who again would be an outsider in many ways. But I wanted to portray his life realistically, and he is not a victim, and I didn't want to make him a victim.
Mhm.
He has challenges just like everyone else, but that I wanted to make it multifaceted.
It's really wonderful portrayal. I mean, people know here that I work a lot with the disability community, and I'm learning so much also with terminology and with how people perceive themselves in different ways, how people have discussions about terminology and about classification within the community. So VJ is an awesome character, and here's another little excerpt before we go to the next reading. since we're
Yeah.
talking about this, in England, they have to go to the job center, so they're looking for jobs. Obviously, it's not um, really great jobs. VJ actually jokes about this. He says, "What job do you have on offer? Prime Minister or head of a record label?" And and he goes there, and of course, people at the job center look at look at his missing arm, and they I have to look at the quote here. Here it is. So he is here at the advisor or the person who would look at the qualifications and maybe recommend a job opening. Here's the excerpt. The advisor peered at him, eyes landing on VJ's left arm. A clerk? You really think you'd be suitable? The man blinked heavily, as though he was trying to catch flies between his lashes. Well, I got my O levels and I dealt with customers back in Uganda. Yes, but what about that? The man frowned, staring at his arm. VJ wouldn't rise to the bait. What, this? Look, Mr. VJ, you can call me VJ. Look, VJ, I'm not sure what things were like in Africa, but there's enough demand for jobs as it is. So it's really an awesome excerpt because you roll both into one. Like you roll the disrespect towards people with disabilities into the disrespect of people who are refugees,
Yeah.
especially perceived as Africa as sort of a backwater or sort of
Yeah.
behind in terms of civilization. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think. Well, it was actually really. What was? I mean, obviously, the research on the Ugandan Asians was a little bit challenging, but there was stuff on that. But it was really hard to find information on people who had come as refugees with a disability and what benefits they might have been able to get. And like they're just not there in the history, or if
Yep.
they are, it's very difficult to find. So it's just another reason to sort of show like these would be the sorts of challenges they might have.
We have to keep it. That's a good point. We have to keep in mind we're talking about the 70s. I should do a special. We'll do a special show about disability in literature. Maybe we've done one a couple of years ago with virtual ability community here in Second Life. Quick question here from Kovri Matavan. Neema, how has the book gone down in the Ugandan Indian community?
Yeah, it's been pretty extraordinary actually. I have spoken to people both. Actually, went to an event up in Gateshead near Newcastle, well, in Newcastle, and there was a guy there who had come over as a young child with his family, and he had this really strong Geordie accent, but he was obviously originally Ugandan Asian. It was really cool to hear, and he was talking about how it's such a tiny community, as you can imagine, in Newcastle. It's not necessarily a place where actually many Asians live, let alone that specific type of Ugandan Asian. And he was talking about his experiences, and he said, it's great to see a book about that experience. So I've had so many positive discussions with people, both who were part of the expulsion and then the children of that generation who
Mhm.
said things like, I never spoke to my parents about this before. And when, we heard about your book, we went and bought your book, and now we're having conversations we've never had before. And it was
Mhm.
similar for me, slightly different, obviously. So my parents came over as economic migrants from Kenya and Tanzania to here, but I hadn't really learned much about their upbringings back in Kenya and Tanzania. And this gave me the opportunity to do that. So I think that's why these books are so important. If you don't
Yeah.
see them reflected, if you don't even know about the histories, I knew very little about the history. I hope that people have learned something, and I've had the positive reception. I have to say, I'm so glad, because obviously it's always difficult when you're talking about living memory with historical fiction.
Absolutely. And but you're starting, I mean, the book starts intergenerational dialogue that may not have been here before, as you're pointing out with this story. This is the opportunity. Now you should send little digital MP3 recorders to all these people and to record their own stories and then share
That's
them.
a great idea.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, am I not a good marketing person? But you're the
You'd be
professional.
excellent. I know. I should have thought that. No,
I'll
that's
give you the
brilliant.
idea for free. You can,
That's a
I'll
great
just,
idea.
um, oh yeah, before we do before we do the last reading, I was going to ask you, where would you go if you had been in that situation?
Oh
And
wow.
let's just say you had, like, I don't know, all passports, but you're born in Uganda. You go like, okay, should I go to the UK? Should I go to India where you've never been? Maybe you've been there for vacation or whatnot.
So it's oh god, I've never been asked that question. I've never even really thought about it from my perspective, only my characters. Um, I have to say, I think I'm a bit biased towards the UK because obviously I know it better. I think, but
Mm,
I can't. You've got. I suppose what we need to understand is I can understand why a lot of people might think they were Ugandan Asians, then surely they would have gone back to India. They spoke Gujarati or whatever language that they spoke in India, or at least their parents would have spoken. But the lifestyle is so different in
mm,
India that compared to what they had built up in Uganda as business owners, they would have thought that maybe a life in the UK, despite it being much colder than Uganda and all the rest of it, might give them some of those same opportunities to build businesses in a way that is quite hard to do for some people in India at first. So I imagine I would have done what some of my characters did and come to the UK, but
mm.
who knows? It is obviously an opportunity to go somewhere completely different. Maybe I'd gone to the US or Australia. Some people went to Sweden. Who knows? I might, but I mean, obviously, language is a
Right.
challenge.
But the language that makes sense to me. I think from that perspective, you would have perceived Britain as maybe rightly or wrongly, maybe a little bit more orderly, I guess, or there is
Yeah,
something that you can navigate easier as a business person.
I think so. I mean, and again, partly that was true. There's no denying, but also it's a legacy of the colonial times that you are. It's sort of ingrained in you that they know what they're doing and they'll have it all organized and so on. So I should also stress, because a lot of people came over on British passports and because it was a colony, most people, especially the younger people, spoke fluent English. My parents speak very proper, 1950s
Hmm.
English. Well, they did anyway. They're a bit more sort of slangy now, but the way they write their letters is very formal and very, very well written.
Hmm.
And it's kind of different to maybe some of the people that came over from the subcontinent, where maybe that wouldn't have been the case. I mean, some would have spoken English too, but it's not always the case.
Hmm. That's interesting. Better English than the English.
Possibly. I mean, my parents were taught. I found this out during the writing of the book. Dickens and Shakespeare and Austen, just as I was, which really surprised me.
Better read than the. Let's do one more reading, and then I have a few more questions about um, writing tips, maybe, and
Yes,
marketing tips and such.
sure.
If questions in the local chat, please keep them coming. I'm getting better in incorporating them into the flow. Now, this excerpt is actually happening at the Dukan,
Yes.
right? Am I pronouncing this
Yeah,
correctly?
Dukan. Yeah, that's right.
Dukan, where you can buy absolutely everything from phone cards. Well, not in the 70s, I guess. to
Not
to
quite. They're not
50.
that. They're not that advanced.
I was like cell phones and chips. No, no, wait a minute, 1972. Um, and this is happening here. The Moti-chan is running this. VJ is a boy. He's hanging out there. I mean, this is kind of the dream, I think, for at least for me. I would have probably found it really cool if my dad would have a store like this, and you hang out.
Yes.
If you're yeah, if you're like a hobby anthropologist as a kid or something, and you get like quirky characters come in and tell you all sorts of weird stories, and you're just there and listening, and uh and the whole world is coming in there. So that's kind of the scene, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that is partly. It's very loosely inspired by my own back because my dad originally was a news agent. So and it,
Ah,
it was a sweet shop. So you can imagine how amazing it was to go to that shop and
did you
just
get a
hang
lot
out.
of sweets? Could you just take
I
whatever you
mean,
wanted?
yeah, but I mean, my dad had a bit of a limit. He didn't want my teeth falling out. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I completely agree that what it is what it would be like for a child. Yeah, so I'll just start. And I should say that in this section, there's obviously Vijay and his father Motijan, but also a family friend, Sardaji.
Hmm. this is an older guy or the father's
Yes.
generation, I guess, and he comes in and he's one of those guys that is just full of stories.
Yeah. When Vijay was a boy, he would sometimes stay inside the dukan and listen to Sardaji's stories rather than play outside in the street with Pran and the other kids. I came here before your father was even born, you know that, Sardaji would tell him as he stuck his finger under his huge white turban and scratched, while young Vijay sat next to him on the platform with his legs folded. Sardaji's silver hair was wrapped up in cloth, but Vijay imagined it was so long it tickled his ankles, trailing down his back like a waterfall. They said we could go to Africa and make some money. That's what they said. Big ships, big sails, big stories. But you know, these ships, they were made of wood, just like this, Sardaji said, giving a hollow knock on the platform. Made of trees. How do they float? We said. How do they stay on the water with all of us inside? But then they promised us money, and the promise of money can silence all fears, all doubts. Sardaji stared at Vijay, his eyes grey blue like the sea. We travelled for many days, all the way down across the belly of Gujarat to Porbandar, and the poor Sala by the port, they were starving, ribs on show, he said, moving his fingers across his own chest. Dark shadows like zebra stripes across their skin. We were told we could just go up the coast and make some money, sail on the Kalapani, go on the black water, they said. Easy, they said, but only for a day or so, they said. So short, so short. And all we had to do was dip our fingers in the ink, place them on the white pages of their big leather books. Like criminals, Vijay had jumped up. Fingerprints, like in the films. Not like criminals, Motajan laughed, bringing over cups of chai. To sign their names. That's right, said Sardaji. Flecks of spittle flew through the air as he blew on the tea. Couldn't write, couldn't read anything. We climbed onto the dhows, watched the land disappear. I cried and cried. I was not much older than you, boy. Imagine. It made grown men cry too when we realised how long we were going to be at sea, when we found out where we were really going. But there was nothing we could do. The black ink on our fingers tied us to the black water. They took us away from the coast, all the way from Mombasa, through the jungle to build the railways of the British. And some men were eaten by lions. Your father told you that, Sardaji's eyes narrowed. He'd forgotten that he'd told Vijay the story before. Yes, in Savo, the lions were as hungry as we were, and some men disappeared into the night. Sardaji put down his tea and lowered his voice, and then we finally got to Uganda, and the railway was finished. Most went back, but I stayed. But the other week, didn't you say you were taken from your home in the night, Sardaji? Motajan called out from behind the dukan counter. What? I'll tell you what happened to me if you let me. Sardaji lifted his eyes to the ceiling, raised his palm, and let out a long, luxurious fart, punctuated with a sigh. Bye, don't you think I'd know whether I ran away from my family or not? Now listen. And this is how it went. Every afternoon, a different story. Vijay loved all the tales, but wondered whether any of them were true. Perhaps they were Sardaji's memories, or perhaps he'd gathered them together from the people he knew over the years and woven them into his own. And that's the end of that scene.
And that's Neema Shah reading from Kololo Hill. And this is, tell me how to pronounce the name of Shradach. Oh my God, I'm going to
It's
butcher it.
okay, don't worry. Yeah, it's even I sometimes struggle with Sardaji.
Sardarji.
Yeah, that's great.
Sardaji. Sardaji here talks about with young Vijay, obviously, about how he came to the country and again the railway. And you differentiated earlier with this first wave of economic refugees and then later better educated folks who were able to build businesses right from the start and they were not that uh, exploited in the labor situation. So there's another fascinating layer to discover in the book. Again, I mean, I love, like I say this all the time, but those kind of books where you create sort of this tapestry that's situated within this historical context. It opens the door for so many different things if you like to explore, as I do, outside my own cultural realm. Got a little bored with the Bavarian books, to be honest, although the food in Bavaria is also very good. But I digress. Let's talk about marketing. So you have a blog, and on your blog, I found uh, a post of 5 novel writing mistakes. Um, First of all, before we go through them, and then we have to stop promptly at the bottom of the hour, or our Linden Lab bosses and producers will um, erase this entire island, drown it in the sea, and expel us from Second
Oh
Life. That would
gosh.
be bad.
Yes.
Uh, uh, my question, you with your marketing background, you've worked with the BBC and other, as I understand, media outlets. Would you say it's a distinct advantage that you could use this knowledge, your profession, as an advantage when you went into the publishing field as an author?
Yeah, so I mean, my day job continues to be working in marketing, and yeah, on some levels, yes, I've worked for big brands with decidedly bigger budgets than obviously I have as a personal author, marketing my own work. But um, uh, oh, it says I've
Oh, I
been
think now
logged
you,
out.
yeah, you just disappeared. Don't worry about it. Come back in. We can still hear you, and on the stream, we can hear you also. So I'm going
Oh,
to vamp a little bit while you're
so
just logging back in.
so should I
Uh,
click quit? Sorry,
yeah, click quit
click
and
quit.
then
Okay,
just
yeah.
start it again. Uh, no problem. As Nima is she was expelled from Second Life. What can I say? I mean, I did
That's
it by just sort of evoking that possibility, and I willed it into existence. Folks, what
that's
do we
very
learn?
meta.
What do we learn? Don't joke about this stuff. It's serious stuff, okay? It can actually happen. So next time I say, let's, for example, oh, it would be fun if if an avatar would land on somebody else's head, for example, then it happens. Frankly, it's my fault. Rosie says, "Don't tempt fate." Now, um, as
Oh, it's weird. I've got Wi-Fi, but it's saying that it can't connect. I'll try again. Can you? I
yeah,
mean, if you
try
can hear me, maybe I should just carry it. We should just carry on.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then,
We can carry on, but try it one more time because
yeah,
then we got the visual as well on the video. Um, Let me just set this up with these five novel writing mistakes. I mean, people see these, and then I'll repost the question about getting into the publishing industry. But let's give Nima a little bit more time to try to get back in.
yeah.
Uh,
It seems to be stuck on halfway. I don't. It doesn't seem to
it
be letting me connect. Weirdly.
things happen. Things happen. You have the wrong passport, Nima. This is obviously very obvious
Obviously,
to
yeah.
me.
This is the case.
So these five novel writing mistakes, if the camera could focus on this slide, and people can tell us maybe in the local chat if they are writers. I know we have several writers in the local audience here in Second Life. Maybe you could put into the local chat what you feel is a mistake that you have made, a mistake that you're terrified of making, uh, or a mistake that you heard a lot about and you feel uh, is overblown. Now that would interest me. I know that Jessica here in Coventry, we have at least two writers in the local audience. So please put that into the local chat. The five novel writing mistakes that Nima is talking about is, and we'll talk about it when she comes back. Technology can be both help and hindrance. Number two, you won't require as much research as you think. Hmm. The best way to learn the craft of writing is by writing and reading. There is no perfect time or way to write. Writer's block happens to everyone, but there's a method for keeping it at bay. So those are the five ones. And people, please do put in the local chat. Bunny says, letting myself be distracted by social media is the reason why Bunny has not finished her novel yet that she started
Tell me about it.
25 years ago. Now, Nima, how's coming back?
I'm
Is it
afraid
working?
no. It's just sort of stuck in the middle. It's just frozen now. It's just not doing anything. It's trying to get in, but it's frozen.
Then force quit Second Life if you're on a Mac, just force quit it. And
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about the um, publishing industry. You have a marketing background. You're an expert. You know how it works. You go into the publishing field as an author. Yes, and the camera you can put the camera on the empty chair. It's kind of a Clint Eastwood situation, if you know what I'm talking about. People Google that. Um, so advantage, disadvantage, or really no discernible plus or minus with your skill
I
set.
think I'm back. Am I back? Am I
Let's see.
floating?
You're coming in. Yes.
Yeah, surprise.
You know, this is
Um,
really strange, Nima, because so many strange things. We're talking about people being expelled. Then, of course, Captain Kirk is going into space as we speak, so we can't watch it. I don't know if he's already in there. William Shatner at the age of 90.
oh yeah, it's
I don't know
amazing.
what he was paid by. I'm not a big Jeff Bezos fan, to put it mildly, but it's very cool that Captain Kirk is in space. That's definitely cool. Now, Nima, you're kneeling before the gate.
Sorry.
Before your no, no, please stay there. I think that's a great visual.
Why not? I'll kneel. I'll do the whole sort of Asian sort of. This is how we might sit in temple. So why not?
Perfect. It's awesome. So lastly, click the speak button. Click the speak
Oh
button, and
yeah,
we're ready to
sorry.
roll.
I seem to have hold on, let me escape. I'm learning my lesson here.
Yeah,
Let me
escape.
speak. Let me try and get back in anyway, quickly.
There you go. And people can.
And I'll just quickly see if I can get to where I need to be, and if not, I'll just carry on.
No,
So
this looks
yeah,
really cool, actually. But okay,
uh,
okay. Yeah, you're sitting.
so yeah,
Go ahead.
basically, it's definitely been a help. There's no question. Even though it's quite different, as I said, dealing with big brands versus promoting yourself. And it's obviously harder to promote yourself and talk about yourself for most of us
Yeah.
anyway,
Yep.
unless you're Donald Trump. So
Good
I
point.
think from that point of view, but yeah, I've definitely, there's a lot of skills. And what I've been trying to do with the marketing is also just help other authors. So I run marketing courses and stuff like that, just to give them the basics and what it means to build an author brand and other elements. And but that said, book publishing is very unique, and I have learned quite a lot about it from obviously working with the publishers. There definitely are differences to what I work in, which is TV. But yeah, it's definitely, I can't say it's been a hindrance for sure.
But the marketing yourself, I mean, this is, I think, goes for everybody. I was just talking with somebody about this. Um, that is definitely something that is difficult. For some people, it does come natural. Um, I think you can learn it to a certain extent,
Yeah, yeah.
or you can learn tricks in order to kind of separate yourself from yourself and all this kind of stuff. But it's definitely something that's not natural to constantly talk up your own work in the highest terms. I mean, it
No.
feels kind of awkward.
Well, no, and actually, one of the things I talk about is that that's not actually what will make a successful marketing plan. Like, part of it,
Hmm.
obviously, you do have to sort of say, my book is now on sale, my book is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
But when you're building a brand, what you're really trying to do is build an emotional connection. So when you go on things like social media, you're trying to develop a rapport, not as people aren't developing a rapport with a book, they're developing it with the author. And so just be yourself, talk about other things, champion other people's books. Actually, the self promotion, i.e., the buy my book, is only one small part of what makes a good marketing plan, essentially. And a lot of it comes from networking, from sharing other people's
right.
work and hoping that they'll do the same
And
for you,
and
but
and
in an authentic
being
way. Yeah,
provocative, yeah,
yeah.
in an authentic way. So in other words, for example, today I was blocked by a Bitcoiner because I was very provocative with him. So the authenticity for my brand, if I'm asking you for advice, you would say, yeah, Draxter, you're kind of a provocative kind of guy. So that's perfect. You just sort of hit people around with like, a Bitcoiner just blocked me, and then you get 50 likes, and then you say, by the way, I also made a really great feature film about
Yeah,
virtual worlds, right? That's the
yeah,
way to
yeah,
go.
that kind of thing, exactly. And yeah, it's not also not being like just pretending to be 100% nice and anodyne and all the time. You can be yourself and be open and honest. People will probably appreciate, I mean, obviously try and be a nice person on social media, that just goes without saying. But calling out things or taking a stand politically is not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to decide
Right.
what is right for you, right?
A lot of people didn't get that memo about being nice on social media.
Well, no, that's true.
I have to actually wrap the show, and we cannot go further into these five novel writing mistakes. But Nima has a wonderful blog, and she's also, I think you've done it once, a online seminar. about marketing. Hopefully
Yeah,
you'll do that again.
yeah.
That'd
I'm
be very
intending to
cool.
do more of those. Yeah.
That is awesome. Um, Hold on, I'm just checking. I'm reading my hands. Why am I reading my hands? Why is my head down as I'm trying to wrap up the show? Ah, because I'm sad that the show is over. I get it.
Oh,
Yes, this was a wonderful
oh,
conversation.
thank you.
Nima, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, audience, wonderful audience. I just noticed that Jamanki here in the back with his vehicle actually has SL Book Club on it. It's just an amazing vehicle that he's riding here. Maybe the camera can pan over the audience. Koveri Matavan, a special guest. She's on the other side of the fence together with
Oh,
Billy Snickers. Lots of new faces here today. Wonderful. Uh, the regulars and new faces. Thank you, audience.
yeah. Thank you. It's been yeah. Thank you for being so supportive to everyone, and obviously thank you so much for interviewing me. It's been really great.
The place will stay here. It will be called Kololo Hill on the teleporter. So we have a few hundred people go through it every day and talk with each other and explore books. So
Amazing.
this it's a persistent place. It's not just we're not going to dismantle this and move on. Now, real quick, what are people reading? Just comment on the book trailer. Nima, if you want to put this in local chat, what you're reading, that would be very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some
Tap onto
people
that.
actually don't read. Actually, Tom Hillenbrand, who was on, he doesn't read fiction. He only reads nonfiction and history books, and he writes thrillers and crime and stuff. But I guess that he needs to know what happens in the real world, you know,
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean,
all
I
this
read all
kind of
sorts.
stuff.
To be honest, it doesn't bother me. Uh, but yeah, I'm reading a few things, so I'll write them into the chat now.
I read exclusively books that have to do with what's happening in Second Life. Now, that's obviously not true. The Second Life Book Club happens every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, Second Life time. The email for the program is slbookclub@draxtor.com. You can contact me if you have suggestions how to do it better, or if you have suggestions for authors. We're booking already mid 2022 right now, so it's very busy. The show is produced by Isabel Sharin, Shyla the Super Gecko, and myself. The sets are built by Ruby Geek. Ruby could not be with us today. She felt a little bit under the weather. She did an amazing job. It's unbelievable. She hasn't read the book. It's really based on me reading it and having two meetings with her, relating the themes to her, and then it gets through her filter and she comes out with this. It's just amazing. Research, Shyla the Super Gecko, avatars made by Ruby. Special thanks to Marianne, Theanine, Brett, and Patch from Linden Lab, AJ McDowell, Arden Schwartzman, all the moles at Linden Lab. We used to have security from the moles. I don't know why did they fire the security people? But we didn't have any griefing either, so that's cool. I don't know why people don't harass us because they think we're lame anyways because we're just reading books. There's a lot of sponsors for this program, wonderful Second Life content creators. Please visit them. Just check out what you find here on a Book Club Island, and if you like something, just check out who made it and visit them and tell them you've seen it on Book Club Island. There is a tip jar on the side here if you have loose Linden dollars rolling around in your pants. Please put them in there. That gets split up in between the volunteer staff, and that's pretty much it. Next week, 12 o'clock, Wednesday, we have a few folks on a panel discussion. These are three authors that are published by Rebellion Publishing. These are folks from the speculative fiction world. They've been on the show before. Derek Kunskin, Wayne Santos, and Primi Mohammed is back. And the title of the show is Writing for slash about slash to rebel parentheses lion. I'm very proud of this title. We're talking about uh, Rebellion Publishing. We might actually have the publisher here as well. These three authors have a new novella out, and that's next Wednesday. 12 o'clock, right here on the Second Life Book Club. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye.